The roar of the Lamborghini's engine echoed through the streets of Eastlake, a neighborhood Marcus M.J. Johnson once called home. His car, a sleek orange Aventador, turned heads everywhere it went, a symbol of success that was impossible to ignore. But as Marcus drove down the narrow streets, past the corner stores and basketball courts where he had spent his childhood, he noticed something else. The way people stared, not with admiration, but suspicion. Marcus had achieved what most people in his old neighborhood only dreamed of. At 30, he was the CEO of a thriving tech startup, a self-made millionaire who had turned years of struggle into a life of luxury and opportunity. But no matter how far he had come, his success always seemed to carry an asterisk in the eyes of others. In their minds, a young black man driving a car worth more than some houses didn't add up unless he was a drug dealer or a criminal. As Marcus pulled up to a stoplight, the weight of those stares pressed down on him. He adjusted his watch and glanced in the rearview mirror, spotting a police car creeping up behind him. Its lights weren't on, but Marcus could feel the officer's gaze. He sighed and tapped the steering wheel, silently counting down until the inevitable. The light turned green, and Marcus eased forward, his heart pounding despite his innocence. Within moments, flashing red and blue lights filled his mirrors. He pulled over, keeping his hands on the wheel as the officer approached. "License and registration," the officer barked, his tone sharp and loaded with suspicion. Marcus complied calmly, handing over his documents. "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer ignored the question, glancing at the car's luxurious interior. "How does someone like you afford a car like this?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "I'm an entrepreneur. I own a tech company." The officer snorted, clearly unconvinced. "Tech company, huh? Mind if I take a look inside the car?" Marcus knew his rights, but he also knew the weight of the situation. Saying no could escalate things. Reluctantly, he stepped out of the car and watched as the officer searched the vehicle, opening compartments, flipping through papers, and looking for anything incriminating. A small crowd gathered, murmurs spreading as people pulled out their phones to record. Marcus's chest burned with humiliation, but he refused to let it show. After several tense minutes, the officer came up empty-handed. All he found was a stack of business cards, each bearing Marcus's name and the title CEO. The officer's face stiffened as realization dawned. "You're free to go," he said gruffly, handing back Marcus's documents. Marcus got back in his car, started the engine, and drove away, but the damage was done. He wasn't angry. He was used to moments like this. What he wasn't used to, however, was what would come next, a chain of events that would shock not just the neighborhood, but the entire city. As Marcus drove away, he could feel the weight of the encounter settling on him. He had been through this before, too many times to count. No matter how successful he became, no matter how legitimate his achievements, people like the officer refused to see him as anything but a stereotype. It was exhausting, and more than that, it was deeply humiliating. By the time Marcus reached his downtown office, he had managed to push the incident to the back of his mind. His assistant, Brianna, greeted him at the door with a clipboard full of notes and updates about their latest projects. She paused when she noticed his expression. "Rough morning?" she asked, concern in her voice. Marcus nodded. "Just another reminder that no matter what I do, I'll always have to prove myself." Brianna didn't press further, knowing Marcus well enough to understand when he needed space. As he walked into the sleek, modern office he had worked so hard to build, he glanced at the framed photos lining the walls, his first pitch meeting, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for his scholarship program, and a picture of him with his sister, Shayla, on the day she graduated college. These moments were a testament to his journey, but they were also a reminder of how much further he had to go. Later that evening, Marcus's phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications. Curious, he opened his social media apps and froze. A video of his interaction with the police officer had gone viral. The footage, filmed by a bystander, captured the entire humiliating scene. The officer's accusatory tone, the baseless search, and Marcus's quiet dignity throughout. Comments flooded in from all sides. Some people expressed outrage on his behalf, condemning the officer's behavior and the systemic biases it represented. Others, however, clung to the same stereotypes that had fueled the incident in the first place. "Must be nice to have drug dealer money. No way someone like him owns a Lambo legally." Another example of why we need to look deeper. Marcus stared at the screen, his emotions a whirlwind of anger, frustration, and resignation. But as he scrolled through the comments, one stood out to him. Why do we assume success has to look a certain way? This man deserves an apology. That comment lit a spark in Marcus. He had spent years trying to prove his worth quietly, letting his achievements speak for themselves. But now, with the world watching, he realized he had an opportunity to change the narrative. The next day, Marcus sat in a boardroom with his best friend and business partner, Jordan J.D. Davis. J.D., a quick-witted strategist with a knack for turning problems into opportunities, was reviewing the situation with his characteristic calm. "This could go one of two ways," J.D. said, leaning back in his chair. "You could let it blow over, or you could turn it into a teachable moment." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's not just about me. This is what every successful black man faces. We're forced to justify our existence, to explain our success like we're criminals who got lucky." "Exactly," J.D. replied, "which is why we need to flip the script. Let's tell your story. Show people what you've built and what you stand for." Together, they decided to host a community event in Eastlake, inviting local leaders, neighbors, and the media. The goal was to showcase Marcus's work, not just his success, but how he had used his resources to uplift the community. As the event gained traction online, so did the backlash. Critics emerged, accusing Marcus of using the incident for publicity or playing the victim. Some even claimed the video was staged. Marcus tried to tune out the noise, but the negativity took its toll. One night, while sitting with his sister Shayla, he voiced his doubts. "Maybe I should just let this go. I didn't sign up to be some kind of activist." Shayla, who had always been his biggest supporter, shook her head firmly. "You didn't sign up for it, but it chose you. You've worked too hard to let ignorant people define you. Tell your story, Marcus. Show them who you really are." Her words gave him the strength to keep going. On the day of the event, hundreds of people gathered at the community center Marcus had helped fund years earlier. The air buzzed with anticipation as neighbors, local business owners, and young entrepreneurs filled the space. Marcus stood at the front of the room, dressed sharply but simply, his presence commanding attention. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, pausing for a moment to collect his thoughts. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "I've spent my entire life working to prove that where you come from doesn't have to determine where you end up. But no matter how far I've come, there are people who still see me as nothing more than a stereotype." He gestured toward the projector screen behind him, which displayed images of his journey, his humble beginnings, the launch of his startup, the after-school programs he had funded. "This car," he said, showing a picture of the Lamborghini, "isn't just a symbol of success. It's a reminder of the roads I've traveled to get here, and I refuse to let anyone diminish that." The crowd erupted into applause, their support overwhelming. But the most surprising moment came when Officer Whitaker entered the room, his face a mix of regret and determination. Whitaker approached Marcus after the speech, his demeanor uncharacteristically humble. "Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low but sincere. "I let my biases get the better of me that day. I've been doing a lot of reflecting, and I realize I was wrong." The room fell silent as Marcus considered the officer's words. Finally, he extended his hand. "Apology accepted," he said, his tone measured. "But let's make sure this isn't just about words. Let's work together to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The viral incident became the catalyst for something much bigger. Marcus partnered with community leaders to launch an initiative aimed at addressing systemic biases in policing and promoting understanding between law enforcement and marginalized communities. He also started a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, using his story to inspire the next generation to dream big despite the obstacles they might face. As months passed, Marcus's story continued to gain traction. Rachel Carter, a local journalist, published an in-depth feature about his journey, highlighting not only the Lamborghini incident, but also the systemic issues it represented. The article painted a vivid picture of Marcus as both a victim of prejudice and a beacon of hope. Meanwhile, Whitaker became a surprising ally in Marcus's mission, using his platform to educate fellow officers about the dangers of racial profiling. His transformation added depth to the story, showing that change was possible, even for those entrenched in old biases. 1 year later, Marcus found himself back in Eastlake, driving his Lamborghini through the same streets where the incident had occurred. This time, the stares he received were different, full of admiration and respect. Children waved excitedly, neighbors smiled, and a mural honoring Marcus's contributions to the community adorned the side of a building. He pulled over to talk to a group of kids playing basketball, offering words of encouragement and reminding them that their dreams were valid, no matter what anyone else said. Success isn't just about what you achieve, he told them. It's about how you use it to lift others. Marcus stood in the heart of Eastlake at the unveiling of a new community center named in his honor, the Marcus Johnson Innovation Hub. The once abandoned warehouse had been transformed into a state-of-the-art facility, complete with computer labs, classrooms, and a mentorship space for aspiring entrepreneurs. The building buzzed with excitement as families, local leaders, and media gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. A year ago, Marcus had been humiliated on these same streets, pulled over, and wrongfully judged. But instead of letting that moment define him, he had turned it into a movement. Today he stood as a symbol of resilience and progress, proof that success was not confined by stereotypes or societal expectations. The mayor took the stage to deliver a speech, praising Marcus for his contributions to the community. Marcus Johnson has shown us what it means to rise above and give back. His story is a testament to the strength of perseverance and the power of unity, she said. The crowd erupted in applause as Marcus stepped forward, the microphone in his hand. As he looked out over the audience, he spotted familiar faces: Shayla, who had just been accepted into law school; JD, who stood with their team, beaming with pride; and even Officer Whitaker, now an ally and advocate for reform. Seeing them reminded Marcus how far they had all come. He took a deep breath and began. When I was a kid growing up here, I used to walk these streets dreaming of a better life. I promised myself that one day I'd break the cycle and come back to make a difference. But even after I achieved success, I was reminded that the world doesn't always see us for who we are. The crowd grew quiet, hanging on his every word. A year ago, I was stopped right here, he continued. Not because I broke the law, but because I didn't fit someone's idea of what success should look like. That moment could have broken me, but instead, it reminded me why I do what I do. It's not just about proving people wrong, it's about lifting others up so they can prove themselves right. Marcus then gestured toward the Innovation Hub. This center isn't just a building, it's a place where dreams will be nurtured, where kids from this neighborhood will know that they are capable of greatness. It's a reminder that no matter what labels the world tries to put on us, our potential is limitless. The crowd cheered, and Marcus smiled, humbled by the support. Among the applause, he spotted a group of young boys wearing basketball jerseys, staring at him with wide-eyed admiration. He saw himself in them. The same hunger, the same hope. After the ceremony, Marcus made his way over to the boys. "What's up, guys?" he asked, crouching down to their level. "What are you all working toward?" One of them, a boy named Jamal, spoke up. "I want to be a doctor," he said shyly. Marcus grinned. "That's a big dream, Jamal. You know what's even bigger? Knowing that you can make it happen. And when you do, you come back here and help the next kid, deal?" Jamal nodded enthusiastically, and Marcus handed him a business card. "When you're ready, come find me. We'll make sure you have everything you need to succeed." The transformation extended beyond Marcus's personal journey. Officer Whitaker, who had once been the face of bias in Marcus's story, was now an advocate for change within the police department. At the event, he approached Marcus with a mix of gratitude and humility. "I've learned a lot this past year," Whitaker admitted. "You didn't just open my eyes, you opened a door for me to be better." Marcus nodded, his expression warm but firm. "It's not easy to change, but it's worth it. And this community needs people like you to set an example." Whitaker reached out his hand, and Marcus shook it, the moment a symbol of reconciliation and growth. The cameras captured the handshake, and while it couldn't erase the past, it marked a step toward a more hopeful future. As Marcus's story gained national attention, it sparked a larger conversation about racial profiling, economic inequality, and the assumptions society places on success. His mentorship program expanded beyond Eastlake, partnering with schools and organizations across the country to provide resources for young people from marginalized communities. The viral video that had once been a source of pain became a catalyst for change. It inspired documentaries, panel discussions, and even legislation aimed at addressing systemic biases. Marcus was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and government hearings, sharing his story and advocating for a more inclusive world. But despite his growing platform, Marcus remained grounded. He continued to work closely with his community, investing in local businesses and showing up for the people who had supported him from the beginning. "No matter how big this gets, Eastlake will always be home," he often said. One evening, Marcus sat on the porch of his childhood home. The Lamborghini parked in the driveway. Shayla joined him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the neighborhood kids play tag under the streetlights. "You've done a lot this past year," Shayla said, breaking the quiet. "Do you ever feel like you've proven your point?" Marcus took a sip of his coffee and smiled. "It was never about proving a point. It was about making sure the next kid doesn't have to." Shayla nodded, her admiration clear. "You know, Mom would have been so proud of you." Marcus's smile grew softer. "She's the reason I keep going. She showed us how to fight, how to dream. This is all for her, and for everyone who believed in us when no one else did." The next day, Marcus found himself back in his Lamborghini, driving through the streets of Eastlake once again. But this time, the experience was different. Instead of judgmental stares, he was greeted with waves, cheers, and nods of respect. He passed by murals celebrating his achievements and kids pointing excitedly at his car, shouting his name. As he turned onto a familiar street, he noticed Jamal and his friends playing basketball. He slowed down and rolled down the window. "Hey, Jamal!" he called out. The boy ran over, his face lighting up. "Still working toward being a doctor?" Marcus asked. "Yeah," Jamal replied. "I even started a science club at school." Marcus grinned. "That's what I like to hear. Keep at it, all right? And remember, big dreams need big work." Jamal nodded, his determination clear, and Marcus drove off, his heart full. For every roadblock he had faced, for every moment of doubt and frustration, this made it all worth it. As Marcus continued driving, the sun set behind him, casting a warm glow over the city. His Lamborghini wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a symbol of perseverance, and a reminder that success knows no boundaries. Marcus had turned a moment of prejudice into a lifetime of purpose, proving that the true measure of success wasn't just in what he achieved, but in how he used it to uplift others. The world might have called him a drug dealer for daring to dream big, but now they called him something else. A leader, a trailblazer, and a force for change.